tell you to get into their career. I mean, most parents would want to protect the kids, you know, like if they've gone through struggles, to see that it becomes easier for the children. But then there are some parents who feel that that's not the right way. Kids need that getting into the swimming pool without knowing how to swim. Ki tairna waise seekho. There are various ways of parenting. Yeah. I agree with what your parents did. I mean, I would do the same with my kids, or I kind of liked it with my what my parents did. Similar kind of training, that it's your hard work. And I didn't take money either from my parents ever since college, like do it on your own kind of a thing, you know. But yeah, you know, when you were talking about your earlier fitness training, when you started with that, even though you're the most favorite podcaster in India, tell me about BeerBiceps. Why BeerBiceps? I mean, people who don't know, my viewers and listeners who may not know why you started with BeerBiceps as the name.
Yeah, the original thought behind that was that I couldn't speak Hindi well back then. Hindi as a language is something that is very easy to speak conversationally, but when you're speaking to camera, when you're you know, making up a script on the go, it's not the easiest process.
Correct.
So for me, my thinking language was English. For many of us in Mumbai, it is that way. You can have a conversation in Hindi, but you can't speak to camera. So I thought, okay, I'm doing English, might as well target an international audience. No one's going to follow someone called Ranveer Allahbadia who's sitting at 200 subscribers on YouTube, but someone might be intrigued by the name BeerBiceps. So that back then, in terms of fitness YouTube channels, everyone was promoting the idea of being obsessed with fitness and making it your whole life.
But why beer?
I wanted to promote the idea of balance within fitness. So have fun, party, but also work on your fitness. And at that point in my life, this is before I became a teetotaler. I became a teetotaler at 25, but pre-age 25, I had a pretty wild engineering college life. And
so beer was your go-to?
Back then, yes.
Right? Like, I guess engineering students all have one weakness, what do you say, or one penchant, I don't know what you want to call it, where it's a go-to thing that they would go.
I think engineering college is divided into two poles, the front benchers and the back benchers.
Okay.
So the front benchers will do everything right and study and, you know, do all the right things even from career perspective. Back benchers are always the ones who end up leaving college and getting into films, getting into YouTube, getting into startups.
How did fitness happen?
I grew up pretty overweight. At age 16, I was diagnosed with a gallstone, and that was a very painful experience. It was so painful that I decided that I'm never going to let my body reach this point of a lack of health again. And you know, the rest is history. Just one thing led to another. Ended up being mentored by the right people from a fitness perspective. Got really into it. Realized that okay, it's affecting my personality and confidence levels well. So it's probably the right habit to inculcate. So just got very deeply into it again during engineering college. I think that phase of engineering college was very difficult, but it led to a lot of tangentially good things for my life. So yeah, a lot of BeerBiceps has happened back in college.
We talked earlier about you know, how people think that when content creators are trolled a lot, it affects them mentally and things. It does. To many people, it does. To you, did it affect you? Because you get trolled a lot. You get criticized sometimes for oversimplifying. Of course, you need to do that with your audience. You need to simplify it because young people are mainly your viewers. So you need to complex subjects like, you know, foreign affairs. For example, when you were speaking to Dr. Jaishankar, there are many journalists who said, "Yaar, itna simplify kyun kar raha hai?" So my thing was that his audience doesn't understand complex subjects and he's trying to simplify to his audience. And I think the government of India or the BJP realized at that moment, that's why they reached out to you and, you know, invited you over to ask those questions. So when the trolling happens, when the memes come in, how does it impact on you?
Okay, can I answer two questions?
Sure.
I'll talk about the simplification and then I'll talk about the trolling. But let's begin with the trolling. Okay. Trolling, the only time it affected me in my whole content creation journey was the first time it ever happened. In year 1 or year 2, I had made a video that went viral. It was about Amir Khan's Dangal transformation, and I spoke about perhaps that, you know, the fitness angle is not as natural as is being projected online. again, that was back then, and that video went viral. We got a wave of hate, and that was just new for me to see. It was a new life experience.
Hate bole to fans of Aamir Khan
yes,
going for you.
Back then. And truth be told, I was sitting at about 50,000 subscribers. I did look at that as an opportunity at the age of 23 that, hey, I know fitness, I'm known as a fitness content creator, might as well talk about this because this is the new age of digital content. In retrospect, it was a good move for my career, but I do regret it a little bit in terms of targeting Aamir Khan, irrespective of the topic that we spoke about. I met him later on in life. I apologized to him because I realized that I was trying to do it's called forced collab or second-hand collab. We're basically using someone else's name, sometimes critically, to get a burst of growth on your own YouTube channel, which we see a lot of nowadays. These kind of forced collabs.
Yeah, sure.
So anyway, that was the first time hate affected me, and fortunately for me, the thing is, again, I go back to engineering college, you go through a lot with your professors and your classmates. It's a very competitive environment. It's a very crab mentality oriented environment. So you go through a lot in those 4 years. Without expanding too much on this aspect, just go watch Three Idiots. That's a softened version of the things that happen in engineering college. So I do genuinely believe that you become pretty stoic at the end of those 4 years, and that's what's helped me throughout my journey. I see a lot of content creators getting very, very affected by online trolling, hate, etc., etc. For some reason, I think I've just like blunted it out over the last 9 years. So I literally take it in through 1 year, take it out through the other, and the stuff that remains in my mind is the feedback that I can utilize to improve.
You do see the feedback?
Yeah, of course.
Because like I saw that interview that you did with John Abraham, in which he gets trolled a lot, and he get not only on social media. His was the time of film magazines, where they said he's wooden and he's useless, and I mean he's become a billionaire through movies, through investments, whatever. But the point is, he said that I don't care. They can write what they want. If that was to affect me, then I wouldn't be working. And we talked about this in your podcast with me, in which we talked about this trolling business and things like that. But didn't you take that back home? Didn't you discuss it with your parents? And didn't it bother you?
Only back when I was 23. I remember discussing it with my father and my girlfriend at the time. And your core support system has a role to play in those situations, according to me. But again, that was back then. Over the years, I've realized the nature of online trolling. For example, if you want to understand it better, go to any Twitter troll account or anyone who constantly targets your account. You'll go through their page and you'll see probably 30 to 40 tweets a day, many of which are trolling different accounts. So you realize that, okay, should I be taking this person's opinion seriously? That's case A. Case B of understanding trolling better. So I have spoken about things that I shouldn't have spoken about in my past, like 5 years, 6 years ago when I was 26, 27, just starting to use Twitter, giving an opinion on something where it's not really required for a YouTuber to give an opinion. Gotten trolled and cancelled. Back then, cancelling had just become a new thing. This is back in the lockdown. Even a tweet written against BeerBiceps on Twitter, the best case scenario for that tweet is that it gets retweeted heavily, gets liked heavily, goes on many people's feeds. When you open up the data of that tweet, at the most, I have seen probably 19,000 or 20,000 likes on an anti-BeerBiceps tweet. Parallelly, we upload 4 podcasts a week, each of which is 2 hours long. We get 19 to 20,000 views within the first 10 minutes of that podcast. We get 19 to 20,000 likes in the first day of that podcast. And some of those podcasts end up hitting 250K likes, 300K likes. So, when you really put things into perspective, when you see things from a macro lens, you realize 2 things. 1, the amount of love far outweighs the hate. And 2, all of the world's hate is concentrated on X. So I don't take X very seriously other than taking feedback from certain accounts. So if someone's tweet really stays in my mind, I'll first go to that account and I'll figure that is this a person who constantly criticizes everyone, or is it a person who actually has a keen eye for improvement. And if it's the latter, then I'll take that into account and I will apply it in my work. Now, as for the simplicity aspect of this process, There's a couple of angles. One, I'm an India first content creator. In our country, you gotta stay one step ahead of the audience, not 10 steps ahead of the audience, if results, engagement is your main goal.
What do you mean one step ahead of audience?
Most of our country only got like budget-friendly internet access in 2016 or 17. I think that's when the Jio wave hit.
Jio, yeah.
I began creating Hindi content in 2018 and I've evolved with that audience, as is the case with any content creator. You end up growing up along with your audience. So I've seen their evolution. India is a country where, say, take for example, a tier 3, tier 4 town in India, okay? These kids who were teenagers back then got budget-friendly internet back in 2017. Their parents probably didn't even have a television. So we've gone from being a generation that would only use newspapers to understand the world into being a generation that has the same access to information that a kid sitting in New York or San Francisco has. So it's a very peculiar reality for our country. According to me, India is only now ready for niches. This is in 2024. For all these years, you couldn't make niche content and get the same kind of engagement related growth or numbers related
like the content that you make on TRS BeerBiceps, if you were to make the same content 10 years ago, parents wouldn't be sitting with their kids or allowing their kids, because it was community watching on television.
Yes.
You know, one TV and everybody sits together and watches.
Yeah, I think it is still a version of that to a degree. Let me break down that simplicity angle in an easier way. For example, you have these big TV networks who will have different channels for different purposes. So XYZ News, XYZ TV, XYZ English. I am not XYZ News, which I feel is a bit of a niche. It's a much more elaborate form of content. I am the kind of YouTube channel that you will switch on at home, leave in the background, and you might make your mom watch it. So you have to be very aware of that. Which is why even if I'm talking about a topic like neuroscience, like depth psychology, like astrophysics, I'll always try boiling it down to the simplest metaphors that are easy to understand.
For whom are you thinking? What is your demographics when you think of the audience?
The next 500 million Indians who use the Indian internet. Which is why even my topic selection is always keeping masses in mind. I feel they're the people who actually need the content. People like us who are sitting in urban metros, the Maslow's needs hierarchy. It says that first you need roti, kapda, makan, which is like your...
Bijli, sadak, pani after that, yeah.
Then you need money and like career and all that. And the last stage you need is self-actualization. I feel most of us in urban metros, we're the 1% of India. So we're already at that self-actualization part. And it's great to create content for that niche. A friend of mine, Think School, creates content for that niche. But most of India is at that first base layer of roti, kapda, makan.
So you want that most base?
On my Hindi channel,
on
yes.
Your Hindi channel.
On my English, I'm targeting people like us. So, but again, even within this domain of urban elite, there's a lot of people who don't understand a lot of topics, because a lot of urban professionals have quit watching TV some time ago. So they've turned to YouTube and they do want to learn about geopolitics. They do want to learn about even national politics, but they want to learn it in a very easy way. So for me, I know that with my English channel, my main audience is, it changes every 2 years. We have a new cycle of targeting a different kind of audience. So during this cycle, our target is older women on the English channel. And we consciously, create
Thank
content.
You. Especially when you get the John Abraham kind on your show. Yeah, but yes.
The Hindi is the family audience.
Yeah. But see, 2 years ago when I was starting out podcast, I was like, how do I change? Because I had a rigid style of doing things for so many years, and you have to keep changing, right? And so I had a journal style of doing.
I love your podcast.
Thank
you. Even the way you bring the food in the middle, and it's like
something
again the conversations go very, very deep. Like I view your podcast from a place of self-actualization again.
Seriously?
Yeah, when I want to get into the depths of a topic, I'll open up your podcast.
So then I was recommended that watch TRS. So I started watching you, and I was researching कि कैसे बोलने का style, easy बोलने का style, not stressed out that I have these points and these points have to be, because that's how a journo is, right? I have 20 minutes. 20 minutes में what, where, when, how, why. ये सब आना है, I need this, I need to concentrate and figure out where India stands, where America, where Pakistan, where I need to bring in all these aspects. And if I'm doing a political interview, a certain framework. But then I saw your style, it was very easy. And I was like, he's so aram se having these conversations. So I learnt a lot by watching you, and then other podcasters. I watched American podcasts because their journeys have been different and their style of conversation is different.
I also feel that audience is completely different, ma'am. Like,
Yeah.
like I tried aping the American audience
Nahi
for the
hota.
sake of our stuff. It's not the same at all.
Yeah, but then it's interesting how you see they don't have the diversity which we have in our audiences, in our guests, in the language, in the food, in our even our emotions.
Yeah. Topic selection.
Topics, like we began with a wedding.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We began with that kind of thing. So I feel that the content that you create, it's very diverse. So did you decide initially itself that मैं पूरा gamut I will go through, not just in language sphere, but sphere like astrophysics se leke human development, entertainment, sports, everything? You didn't want to get restricted at any point of time?
Yeah, and that's primarily because in my first 2 to 3 years of content creation, I just targeted health and fitness, and I saw how limiting that was for my own vision. I've realized that the way to run a content creation career sustainably is to go really wide with your topic selection, but also that works in my favor because I enjoy multiple subjects. So I get to do this for a living, just talk to people, understand how the world works, and true knowledge is knowing that you know nothing. So the further I go into different domains, the more I realize how many more domains are there to be explored. So I really enjoy my job.
It's growth as an individual also, no?
Yeah, ma'am, thank you. I think you understand that because you're a podcaster yourself in so many ways, like now.
Yeah.
And that's what I'd actually categorize you as. And this is a very deep learning journey. Like,
Yeah.
I've not gotten an opportunity to express myself as much as I'd like to over the last 5 years. And I intend on changing that. We started the podcast because I'd run out of content between 2015 and 2019. Everything that I knew, I had put out for the world. So in 2019, I had to go down a different route. I thought that, okay, let me start talking to people and just learning more. It's been 5 years since then. So I've learned a lot about a lot of different domains. And I think very soon I'll be entering a phase where I become a bit of a teacher as well rather than just a student, because I have a lot to say to the world which I've not got a chance to. And again, the bottom line here is I really enjoy my job. So like, this ability to have a sense of creativity attached with video as well as have all these deep thoughts and then express those thoughts through YouTubing and through videos and through podcasts, it's a very fulfilling feeling for an individual.
But you get the guests to your studio. I've noticed that you don't go out there. Is it difficult to get people onto the studio? Do they like throw tantrums? Hum nahi aayenge?
It does happen. Often I've had to have a conversation with people and tell them about the process that we have. Like, it is a bit of a creative process in terms of I want to actually chill with my guests before the shoot. Like I remember even when you had come over, I think we'd had a cup of tea or something.
Yeah.
We just spoke randomly for a bit. So
I do ulta. I don't do that. I've noticed that my kind of guests, or they're slightly different from the profile of you get. If I have the conversation with them beforehand, then on air they don't speak because they feel hum baat kar to chuke hain. We have already said this. But you have a different process.
Yeah, I think I took up this job primarily for the fun aspect of it. I'm talking about podcasting, not content creation. Content creation I took for my career, but podcasts for me were a passion project, and it's become what it's become. I don't smoke or drink or do anything naughty. My high comes from other human beings. So like I really enjoy meeting new people. My social battery does get drained out after weeks work, but I'm ready to go again on Monday because I really enjoy speaking to all kinds of people and I'm getting to meet the best of different industries. So, you know, I have ISRO scientists on the show, I have military men on the show, I have actors, supermodels, entrepreneurs, everyone you can think of, cricketers. It's a very, very fulfilling life experience. This is probably the most fulfilling thing I've done in my whole life, honestly. This has been like a great phase and I'm just maximizing this great phase by also turning it into my profession. So that's where I'm at.
You've created a very successful brand. Tell me about BeerBiceps and Monk Entertainment as brands. When you started it off, did you realize that this would be an upward trajectory so quickly?
Yeah. Now, fortunately for me, I grew up in a tier 1 Indian metro with access to American television. I'd make my parents watch American television with me, which is Cartoon Network, Nickelodeon, Star World, you know, all these channels. And my parents couldn't relate as much as myself and my sister could. And I realized that the gap in thought was that we were really intrigued by the kind of branding on these shows. Branding is effectively, for me, what one feels after consuming content or after consuming a show. What stays with you, what emotion stays with you, what visuals stay with you, and how does it affect your own sense of creativity. So I remember when we were conceptualizing BeerBiceps, the reason I started this YouTube channel was because I was working on a fitness startup, which was going to be like an Uber for fitness trainers. So you could sit at home and like call for a workout. I'd gone to a potential investor after designing my whole UI UX, like, you know, all the app was designed by me. Went to the investor. He said that this is a nice idea. You're going to need help in marketing, so might as well start a social media handle and YouTube channel. So within 3 days, 2 to 3 days, I actually began shooting my first video. But in the span of those 2 to 3 days, I thought of the logo, I thought of the music I want to use, I thought of the colors I want to use. That aspect of thought came from my childhood. Because when you watch even something as simple as WWE, you know, every Indian boy my age has grown up seeing that. There's so many aspects of branding within that stay with you forever. So if I talk to another 31-year-old Indian man now, both of us will be able to relate a lot to the cartoons we've seen, the shows we've seen, the sports we've seen growing up. And this is one thing I feel our country can learn very well from America. Every country can learn from America. That's the hub of branding in the world. I just tried bringing some of those concepts to both BeerBiceps, which is a memorable name. You immediately think of the logo, you immediately think of the color, you immediately think of what the brand stands for, as well as Monk Entertainment, because entertainment says that we're probably in the media field, it's probably a fun young company. Monk E gives you the ability to use an actual bandar, a monkey, an ape as the logo. So branding for me has always been about what a certain company or service or show or product makes the end human feel, because that's how you stay in people's minds.
Differentiation. That's another thing which is important, whether content creating or whether brand, you need to keep your brand separate from the others. How did you do this? Because now it's become a very crowded space as compared to when you started off.
Everything that we spoke about branding right now, I feel that was a big aspect of it. That a lot of people still don't know my name, and that works in my favor. People just know me as BeerBiceps, which is very good.
That happens to you when you go out?
A lot less with time, because our Hindi brand is consciously called Ranveer Allahbadia. It started 3-4 years after BeerBiceps launched, because I thought that, okay, I'm going to target the urban audiences and the Western audiences through this English channel, but let's play a different game on Hindi.
So dilution नहीं होता है when you do this Hindi audience के लिए कुछ और English audience के लिए? BeerBiceps अलग, TRS अलग, Ranveer Allahbadia अलग.
Yeah, I mean it has an upside and a downside. The downside is exactly what you said, in terms of maybe people tend to get a little confused initially, but when they actually explore the ecosystem we've built out, there's effectively only 3 out and out brands. There's BeerBiceps, there's Ranveer Allahbadia, and then there's our IP, our show.
Like for example, my niece knows you as BeerBiceps.
Yeah.
My aunt will know you as Ranveer Allahbadia. You know what I mean? Like in the same family, everybody knows you differently.
Yeah. But I become a conversation at the dinner table.
True. True.
So that's the, I mean, again, upsides and downsides. I'm not an expert, but all I can do is relay what's worked for me. I toyed with the with the thought of dropping the name BeerBiceps because I don't drink anymore, I'm not into bodybuilding anymore, couldn't drop it after.
You're not a monk either, but so what, right?
Yeah. I guess, at the end of the day, long-term branding is about reinvention, about showcasing different aspects of your own personality, especially in the world of content creators where careers are so short-lived. You got to bring freshness to the table constantly. And, I think some time ago we were speaking about the lows. That's one of the aspects of the lows where you realize sometimes that the audience is getting bored of your style or bored of this thing you've created. So what's the next thing you're going to bring to the table? That's the big challenge of this career. Beyond just staying consistent, building out infrastructure, building out teams, the back end, all that. At the end of the day, content creation begins alone in your bedroom with just a book and a pen. And that's the exact challenge 9 years later.
Yeah, because I'm sure your team does this too. Kuch naya karo yaar, kuch naya karo. Just to shake the audience from a lethargy of the guys doing the same thing. Fir se wohi usi ko, So this naya karo, because like I said, it's become a crowded space now. So this naya is what then?
You're asking about what's next?
Yeah, content. Like how do you get the feedback that I am getting boring, I am getting dull in what I'm doing? Because that means that self-realization you got to bring in, that okay, I need to jerk my audience out of that sense that I am giving the same stuff again and again.
Yeah, I think one will feel a sense of that themselves over the long term because you see a drop in numbers and engagement. I think that's the first sign. The second sign is when your team tells you something. The third sign is when people you look up to tell you the same thing. So
mentors you have?
Yes. I mean, that's the joy of podcasting. Again, you meet so many cool people. Some of them you end up staying in touch with. So that's when you have to switch things up. I also genuinely believe that there's so many podcasts in the country now. I think only 10% of the total will end up surviving in the long term. And this 10% will be the ones that reinvent and innovate.
Why do you think they'll die out? Because it's exhausting.
Yes. It's too gruesome in terms of stamina requirement. You need to keep going. Again, I keep saying this a lot. I believe with generating 4 episodes a week, the actual skill involved here is physical fitness. Just to be able to record that much, to have that same routine going every day. That's what people don't understand about media and content creation in general. So I do believe that a year from now, lots and lots of people are going to give up. I also feel it's a demand and supply thing. I think there'll always be space for new podcasters, but you need to bring something fresh to the table and you need to target domains where there is a natural demand from the audiences. So
demand, and I would think that this trust and reliability in the brand, with whether it's with Monk or with the Ranveer show, they need to trust you. They need to know that you're credible when you're doing the questioning, when you're doing the creation, when you're talking, when you're asking the questions. It's not coming from a sense of only the numbers. You believe in what you're asking. Is that important to you?
I think the audience picks that up, ma'am. Again, just from a consumer perspective, when one is listening to a podcast, the experience for that consumer is that they feel like they're in the same room as the people who are a part of the podcast. And you can pick up a lot by listening to a podcast carefully in terms of when does the guest stay silent, what tonality does the interviewer take. There's a lot of subliminal things one picks up. So in the long term, again, we're doing 4 episodes, which is 8 hours of content put out every single week. I can't afford to be anything but myself. So I show my complete self on the internet, barring a few aspects that I believe one should keep private. There are some things obviously that I'll never talk about publicly, but a lot of the questions and conversations are the questions and conversations that would happen even if there were no cameras and mics and the person was giving me that much time.
That's a little hard, isn't it, to put yourself out there? At least for me as a journalist, that was the first difficult thing, that padav, as they say, that step where you've got to put yourself out there, where you have to take away those masks and you can't hide what you are. In the podcast, you can't. Even a politician who comes on a podcast and a politician who goes on stage and speaks, in a podcast, uski asliyat nikal hi aati hai. And even the questionnaire, when you are sitting out there, you got to put yourself out there. Did you hesitate at points of time where you didn't want to put yourself out there?
Bro doesn't hesitate is a meme associated with us. Again, I think just the enjoyment I get from this process works in my favor a little bit. I hear what you're saying in terms of is there a part of you that wants to hold back? Honestly, no. I know that I have one shot at this. I'm living like this one life. So I might as well just go ahead with it. Also, what works in my favor is that I have a very, very good back-end team. So if I have actually said something which I shouldn't have said, which has happened in the past, nowadays we tend to remove pieces.
Okay.
Yeah. So there is a part that my team holds back. And again, this is the power of going in with a team mentality rather than just a solo mentality. So again, that's what works in my favor. But in short, I'm okay making the mistakes because content creation is such a long-term journey. And I've been cancelled so brutally on Twitter and bounced back. This whole process has taught me that unfortunately or fortunately, the internet has a short memory and you are known by your last piece of content. So you'd rather make mistakes, fail, fall down, be criticized, and then get back with a stronger punch.
What were the cancels? Why did you get cancelled? What happened?
I mean, the one that your audience and my audience knows pretty well is our first phase of political podcasts. I do feel I was a bit of what we call a noob in that phase because my thought was just to do an emotional podcast with the human being. I thought I'll consciously make it non-political in order to bring something new to the table. And that worked for me. But the thing is, the one thing I've learned about the political landscape of our country is that it's heavily scrutinized. There's a lot of people who are watching very, very carefully. And there's a lot of people who will get upset with what you're saying, irrespective of what you say. So that was one mistake.
Which one was it? Jaishankar or Smriti Irani?
All four of those.
Piyush Goyal.
The Piyush Goyal podcast, the Smriti Irani podcast, the Dr. Jaishankar podcast, and the
Rajiv Chandrasekhar.
Yes,
No,
Rajiv sir. And I enjoyed those conversations because for me, I was just meeting an older person and asking them about their life.
You were going into South Block. I think it was your first entry into those offices, right?
And I had envisaged doing political podcasts over the years, and I'd always thought I'll show the human side of the person, the emotional side of the person. I realized that when one is talking to a politician, unfortunately or fortunately for them, you have to talk to them as a politician and not a human being because you owe it to like the public. So I think the kind of criticism I got back then was fair. People expected more from me at that point. They expected tougher questioning, which I've done in my follow-up political podcasts. I've brought on people on the pro-Modi side, asked them some tough questions. I've brought on people on the anti-Modi side, asked them tough questions. But unfortunately, that first phase of branding stayed that, oh, it's a soft podcast, etc. I believe there is no right way to podcast with a politician, but you can keep getting better at it. So I still want to bring out the emotional side, the human side of the person, but you have to hold them accountable for, what they're known for.
There's no winning in a politician podcast. I mean, if you have a guest as a politician, you will get trolled because his fans will get angry with you for asking the tough question, and those who are against him or her will get, that why didn't you ask this? Why didn't you ask that? Because everybody wants you to put that politician on the mat. That's not your job as a podcaster.
If there are any politicians watching this, all I want to say is learn from Nitin Gadkari sir. He was the one politician who brutally gave it back to me as well, held me accountable, and we don't see enough of that.
What did he do? What did he say?
He gave it back. He stood up. He was very real on the podcast. He spoke about the reality. I think I asked him about last year's Himachal Pradesh cloudburst, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. And he said that I hold myself responsible. He took blame on himself. Oh. He stood up in portions, and that's what young audiences want to see from the politicians. We don't see enough of that. For me, a lot of the politicians are nicer to me off camera than on camera, which is very weird compared to other occupations. A lot of actors are much nicer on camera than off camera. No. Same with like other stalwarts of other industries. But with the politicians, I think that also Dr. Jaishankar to an extent, but I didn't get to speak to him very deeply because we had a time constraint on that day. But the Nitin Gadkari sir podcast has seen constant growth in terms of numbers, in terms of data, because he was very brutal up and straightforward, and that's why I think he's liked by both the pro-Modi side and the anti-Modi side.
But also, when you were doing the interviews, it wasn't expected out of you from your audience, but then you got a whole new set of audiences because it was political interviews that you were doing. Do you regret doing those, and do you not want to do political interviews anymore?
I will do every single political interview that comes my way, honestly. I enjoy, again, exploring the world through questions. I know that there will be an aspect of trolling that comes my way, and that's perfectly fine. That's a forced collab. That's also giving me publicity in so many ways. And the trolling that actually makes sense, I'll be able to use to become better at my job and go even higher, even further. So,
who do you enjoy speaking to the most? Are these the motivational speaker kinds? Are they Virat? Of course, you liked talking to, and it was that high point in your life. And so, who? I'll tell you honestly that I don't like interviewing people I've adored as a teenager or whatever. You had those heroes. You shouldn't interview them, in my view, because then the world comes crashing down.
Yeah, I hear you. I understand completely what you're saying. But I think there's some subjects and episodes where I genuinely become a child and I do those podcasts. For me, again, I think this boils down to one's childhood. For me, it's the cricket guys. I'm a big cricket fan. I enjoy those a lot. The second one's military. I think that's a whole aspect of Indian life that what CV Street, Civilian Street doesn't understand completely. So I love taking those stories out. And the third one are the spiritual podcasts, because when you talk to the monks, you realize that they're probably the only section of our society that's truly found something near to what pure happiness feels like.
I can't get into that sphere. I'm still too much of a skeptic to get into that.
I hear you. Because I think a lot of our work as content-oriented professionals boils down to your own story before, the public life with cameras began.
Yeah. How do you go with a clean slate? Because for me, I still can't shed that. I'm more a science person than a spiritual person. And I get asked that also. I will do the ritual. I will do the spirituality in person. But I cannot do a podcast, a conversation on that. I'm deeply spiritual, deeply religious, and I will do the traditional stuff, everything in my private life. But to have a conversation is hard for me on that. For you are able to switch very easily in that. I admire that in you.
Thank you, ma'am. I have a mentor called Sid Roy Kapoor. He's a film producer, and he was one of our early high-profile podcasts. And he said that don't leave this process because you have a gift. And I said, really, this is a gift? I didn't know that, just speaking to people and bringing out things is a gift. And that's
I remember Vidya Balan saying that really you had this conversation with him about it. Yeah.
So I don't have an answer about why it's easy for me, but again, I find it as easy to talk to Nitin Gadkari as I do to talk to Gauranga Das Prabhu or anyone like that, because I just think there's something to learn from everyone. I look forward to those conversations first and foremost, because I do get really tired of shooting as much as I do. I'm pretty burnt out by the end of a 2-month schedule of shooting. I don't have much of a social life, and I genuinely look forward to these spiritualist conversations. What I also want to say is that in the last 3 years, we've been podcasting for 5 years, but in the last 3 years, we've had about 37 or 38 rejected podcasts that we've recorded and said that, sorry, we can't put this up, or they are stopped midway because, I'm sure you know this, ma'am, because you've interviewed so many people. By the 45-minute mark, you can pick up the bullshit of a person.
Yeah.
You can tell that, okay, this person's bullshitting, or this person doesn't have actual subject expertise. So my first gut is, if that's happening, I will pause the podcast, and behind cameras, I'll tell them, hey, this is what I need from you. Usually only 10 to 20% of such situations redeem themselves and become better podcasts after that. But 80% of those situations turn into rejected podcasts. And we've had 2 or 3 so-called gurus who've also actually been conmen. And I've picked it up because they're not answering my questions, and they're not answering very simple spiritual questions that another spiritual leader can answer pretty easily. And these so-called conmen get upset if I challenge any of their beliefs.
Seriously?
Yeah. So, like, you don't expect that from someone who's that spiritually evolved.
Tell me an example without giving the name if you don't want to give the name.
We had, I won't give the name, Atharva, who's my producer, is behind me and he's smiling. He knows exactly what I'm going to talk about. We had a very high profile bureaucrat who was on the show recommend a particular guru. And I had deep respect for that bureaucrat. So I said, yeah, so for sure, like I'll have this person on. Now, I don't know why he recommended this person, but this particular spiritual guru, he came to our house where I shoot my podcasts, and his two helpers, sadhvis, old ladies, they came up to me, and the moment I came out of my room, with the door, and then I come out and meet my guest, they came up to me and they said, shh, don't talk too much. So I was like, just praying. So I said, okay. And they had gone to another room in my house and set up the whole room. They put flowers all over the floor. They had laid out like pieces of cloth from that room to the podcast studio for this guy to walk on. They had put stuff in my podcasting room. They had like put flowers and they put fragrance in my podcasting room.
And you have a nice fragrant room, and it's got very nice vibes when you have. So what was the need to do all that?
I think it was just, honestly, I think it was to intimidate me a little bit that we're getting this guy on your show. So I sat in front of him, and within the first 45 minutes, I realized this guy's not answering anything. He's starting to get a little perturbed if I'm cross-questioning him, and he's making up stories. He's crossing the line. When you just asked this question, you said that how do you know when I can't remember exactly what you said right now, but you suggested that some of these people are con men and con women, and that's very true. So you need to have the ability to differentiate between who's the real person and who's not. By the 50-minute mark, I told him, "Sir, I'm sorry, this is just not working out. I know my audience, and I won't be able to put this up." He took it very personally and he said that
Shrap deta hu.
No, fortunately no. With people like this, even the shraps or the curses don't really work because it comes from, these shraps or blessings always come from a place of internal power, and internal power takes years to build out, not these kind of stories to build out. So he just said, I'm not going to give you my time again. I was like, sorry, sir, whatever. Always leave people with a sense of respect, even if you're rejecting them. That's just how my mom has raised me. So even if someone's conning me or if someone's not giving me a great podcast, I will very respectfully explain to them why I can't put this up on my YouTube channel.
Okay, I haven't canned any podcast so far. Even though
I'm sure you felt like it though.
Yeah, oh yes. Midway through, like, kitna gas kar raha hai yaar, matlab, and invariably it's politicians, and I know that they're doing it because it's the party line. Sometimes they don't believe in what they're saying, but they've got to because it's the party line that they are promoting, and I know they're lying, and they know that I know that they are lying. But kya kare, they have that compulsion, so I might try to peel that, but they have to, and sometimes they are very aggressive. And then you'll see in the comment section, Dekha, she's been put down. And that glee that people have, that the interviewer has been put down.
Also, what I sense is our audiences in our country are getting smarter. So when someone's going to get onto a podcast and start bullshitting, I think the audience is at a point where they can pick up on the bullshit. At least I've noticed this in terms of, we've also had politicians who've come on and lied a bit or dodged questions. And yes, there is fanboying and fangirling under those podcasts, but there's also a lot of calling out the bullshit. I think it works against the politician to come on this format and bullshit. They can probably bullshit in a short 15 to 20 minute piece. No one can bullshit over the course of 1 hour.
And putting down a person who's asking the questions. That is something which is short-lived talimara. They'll get a lot of adulation for those few days or max a week. But I think in the long run, they lose out on goodwill. Because what is our job? Our job is just to ask the question. It comes in from a place of curiosity. It's not a question of putting you down. But there are many who feel that ye numbers ke liye aise question pooch rahe hain. That numbers game is something which is, I guess, to a certain extent, maybe they are justified in being skeptical about us doing the questions. But somewhere I think you and I have built up a reputation where they know that it's not for numbers that we are asking the questions. It comes in from an honest space when you're doing the questioning. With you, I've seen that many times people troll you for being in awe of your guest. But I see an honesty when you are in awe of your guests. Are you told by your team, "Aise mat karo, don't give this hero worshipping kind of look"?
I think it used to happen earlier, and I really tried incorporating that feedback from my team early on. But when you meet the person that you've grown up idolizing, there is a part of you that breaks down as a media professional, at least for me. Now, parallelly, after doing 800 episodes and speaking to all the stalwarts I've spoken to, I think I'm finally at that point where I won't fanboy on anyone other than Virat Kohli. Okay. But other than him, I don't think I'll break down with anyone, because I've realized that everyone's a human behind that garb of great branding.
Who's the person you feel that, Abhi, I have to get him or her on the show? That's a quest I haven't done.
It's just Virat Kohli. When I get Virat Kohli, I will begin.
You've done Virat Kohli, haven't you?
I've not had him on the show. I've met him.
Huh. Oh my God, you've spoken about him so much. I thought you've done a Virat Kohli podcast.
Not yet. It'll happen.
You've done Sachin?
No, not yet.
Okay.
And I love Sachin Tendulkar as well. I think I might fanboy when he's in front of me as well. But I've really tracked Virat Kohli's journey since I was a 12, 13-year-old when he played in the under-19 team. And I remember seeing him win the under-19 World Cup and going to my mum and telling her that there's something about this guy, I don't know what it is, he's going to make it big. And I've seen like almost every innings of his, especially from his early career. That person has had a big impact on my own life. And I literally am doing my podcast to be able to be in the same room as him and have him on the show.
How cute is this?
And I know that when he's on my show, I will begin losing interest in my podcast. So I'm at this point, maybe it's a false sense of motivation or some kind of false target that I've set for my own brain, but I'm genuinely running the show at this point to get you, Virat Kohli, on my show.
Who else other than Virat? Who else would you think?
I would love to do Shah Rukh Khan. I think that's something that's going to happen as well.
He's such a brain and a half.
Yes.
I've seen some of his interviews. I haven't interviewed him either, but he's brilliant. In all his interviews, he comes across as somebody who's so intelligent in his answers. He perceives, even while the person is asking the question, he knows which way it's going.
And you know, I think when you podcast for a living, when you speak to people for a living, you gain this ability to look through the person during another interview. So if you see him doing an interview with someone else, you understand what his mentality was there. I think there's maybe 10 layers of him that are hidden, that are not yet out for the public. And what's out there right now is his art that he has kind of created over 3 decades of being the superstar that he is. So I really want to sit down with him and have that human conversation with him and unlock what I wish to unlock about him, which will happen through deeper questioning. So again, this is like what I have envisaged for Shah Rukh Khan. And I want to do the same with Prime Minister Modi. I feel like no one has asked him about how he feels about being himself. Because the pro-Modi side worships him like a god, the anti-Modi side looks at him as the devil. And like no one, I want to know what he thinks, what's up in his mind.
Not Rahul Gandhi. Would you like to interview Rahul Gandhi?
I would actually. I'm open to it. We've reached out to a lot of the Congress politicians who have rejected our invites because they have this impression that I'm on the BJP side and I'm going to destroy them when I get them on the show. So I am very much open to bringing the Congress side of politicians, but I've always seen that around politicians there exists this entourage of people who create the opinions within the politician's mind. And I'm pretty certain that even in these cases of rejection, it's that entourage which has told them, hey, this guy, he's actually going to destroy you, so don't be on his show. I think it's working against them to not be on my show.
True.
So again, this is an open invite. I'm saying it publicly, so I hope that something
as an interviewer, who are the other interviewers you would, when you are just watching, would you watch competition, or do you like somebody's style that you watch that to improve your style or to get a new style? Who do you watch?
again, this theory gets criticized when I put it out. But I've lived out my whole career knowing that our country is so big in terms of population and numbers that the concept of competition doesn't apply as much to our country as it does to America. That's just my belief in the content creation space. Because I believe that we're a creativity-oriented industry. How can you compete completely with another artist? That's just how I look at life. Okay. This is something I learned from my first professional mentor. His name is Tanmay Bhatt, who created AIB. Yeah. And people would assume that Tanmay and AIB are competing with the other comedy houses. And he told me this very early on, that purely in terms of numbers, there can be 20 of us, everyone can make money, everyone can grow. That's how I look at this domain. In terms of Indian podcasters or interviewers who I love your show. I watch a lot of Samdheesh. I think his style is very whack. Yeah. Though whatever, he may get criticized and all, I think he's one of the most fascinating.
It's a different take altogether.
Yeah. I love some of the Latent stuff. I think that's very deep. That's more my style. You know, it's like, it goes layers deep. There's also someone called Gaurav Kapoor who runs a very popular cricket show called Breakfast with Champions. So that's the one I look forward to.
Kamath?
Yeah, of course. I mean, so when I'm having low moments in my career, a call will go out to Nikhil Kamath as well. And we've had a lot. I've known him for like 3 years now because I had him on my show once. Then we just stayed in touch. I have about 2 or 3 people who I'll call to ask for advice. So that's John Abraham, Nikhil Kamath, and I have a cricketer friend of mine.
Why do you think Nikhil Kamath started with podcasting? It's not for money, certainly. So why do you think he did that?
I know him really well. I've hung out with him a lot. So I'll tell you what I think as not just a professional, but also as a friend. He's one of the most well-read people that I know in terms of just the pure quantum of data that he has read in his life is more than the average person. It's more than most of the people I've had on my show. There's probably the top 1 percentile. So if I've done 800 episodes, there's probably 8 people I'd put in that category of knowledge levels. He's at that level of knowledge actually in his own head, and he's an introverted guy, doesn't express himself much. In that Maslow's needs hierarchy, he's also in that self-actualization part of it. He's just trying to discover life. He also understands the power of content creation and independently run media channels. So there's definitely that professional aspect where it doesn't harm anyone to have a bit of a digital following. You remember when I'd spoken about you on the podcast, I'd said that, you know, in terms of journalists, there are very few people who've transitioned into like new age media. It also applies to other professions. So there's very few business owners of his size who've transitioned into being a part of new age media. That's the professional aspect. But I genuinely believe he is just doing this to learn more about domains as well as become a more self-actualized human. People have different ways to do that. Personally, for me, it's spiritual conversations that I have with monks. For him, it's about learning how the world works better. And I think it's worked in his favor because he's literally become like the standout intellectual leader of the business world in our country.
How do shy and introverted people put out such fabulous content where they put themselves out? How does that happen?
I think they're better listeners than they're speakers. That's why they're shy and introverted in the first place. At least, and I'm not an introverted person, but I've noticed this about all the introverted people I know, that they're much better observers, and I think that that's the basis of asking great questions. So, again, speaking about Nikhil, one of the keenest observers that I've come across.
Okay. And what about celebrity interviews, like for interviewers, for example, with Karan Johar getting the creme de la creme of the film industry on his show? Do you feel that it's this insider conversation? Then there's Kapil Sharma. Again, it's like an insider where they all know each other. It's from a same milieu that they're talking. Do you feel that that is great content?
I'm personally not very into the film world. I learn about it for the sake of the podcast that I do. I used to watch a lot of Karan Johar back in the day because I feel like Coffee with Karan's early seasons used to be very controversial and very spicy. And it's a bit of a psychology exercise. Like, you can go back to the early seasons, see what people said about one another, and see how people's career tracked after that. Very interesting exercise for me. I've seen all the early seasons like inside out, but I think as my own life went about, I lost interest a little bit in the film industry. That's just for me.
But also they want to be so politically correct. Initially they didn't. but now they get trolled for everything, and it impacts on their films, that the offers they get, if they get cancelled. If you and I get cancelled, nothing happens to us. We'll still create content, but they won't get films coming their way.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely empathize with them over this. But again, I'm going to speak as a podcaster here. I really look forward to my OTT actors being on the show. When it's a superstar, I need the superstar to be slightly older, because I feel that, I mean, there is definitely an aspect of what you're saying, that their films and their careers get affected by what they say online. But I do believe there is a nuanced way to talk about topics that I don't see too much of. I see a bit of it. I don't see too much of from them. So
also, I don't like having people on the show when they have a movie coming in and then they want to promote that. You know, they come with this preset thing ki isko promote karna hai, then nothing more than that.
I hear you. I think that some of them are really, really nice to talk to. Like, I've really enjoyed my conversations with Janhvi Kapoor, because again, she talks about life openly. She'll never say no to a question.
Yeah.
So I think, again, we can't paint a very generalized picture.
I said Sara Ali Khan, Janhvi, these are young actors who come across as thinking individuals, and just not the, you know, people think that they are just actors, but they come across as very evolved humans. Like in your show, both of them.
I think that's how, if it were up to me, I would love all the film interviews to go down that route of exposing the emotional and spiritual side of a person. Because I do believe actors, in order to become good at their craft, need to be very, very evolved from an emotional and spiritual perspective. And I think Sandesh does this incredibly well with the actors he has on his show, because he asks them very unrelated to films questions, and that's what really reveals the true nature of a person. So I think we need more of that.
See, you are not just you're an entrepreneur as far as Monk is also concerned. How do you see this whole influencers and their realm of you know, making impact, and how young kids now are looking at that as a career? How do you see that?
I'll talk about the negatives first. The negatives are a lot of money and fame early on. The second negative is very short-lived careers. Like, Monk Entertainment is a 7-year-old company. We've already seen 3 to 4 generations of content creators. And the average career span is about 3 to 4 years. That's about it. So most people fade after the 3 to 4 year mark. So I personally believe very few content creators are approaching this as a profession. Very few of them, unfortunately, are attempting YouTube as a platform that they want to showcase themselves. Most of them gravitate towards Instagram. There's no harm in that, but that's also where the money is at, and it's a much easier game than YouTubing, according to me. But creating actual long form video, this is an art form, this is the craft, and this is the long term game that has worked for many of the people who've survived. So that's the basis of what I'll say. In terms of positives, obviously there's an actual impact that you can create in society, because by gaining numbers and engagement, you end up getting a platform for your voice, and you can actually change the world through your opinion. I think that's what one needs to work towards. Very few people work towards that point, because the money and the fame is just insane at that age.
Yeah.
Like, we've seen 19-year-olds take home 20 lakhs a month. So that's just unfathomable money for that age. Yeah. They also lose motivation by the time they're 22, 23. And again, what I said about there being...
Seriously?
Yeah. There's an opportunity for about 20 people, 20-ish people in every single domain to be the long-term stalwarts. For example, I believe that in our country, there is a room for 20 podcasters to run successful podcasts and make money through this process. I'd say the same for the comedy genre. I'd say the same for the beauty genre. But it's very difficult to continuously be a part of that pool. The main game is reinvention, team building, as well as handling your own psychology, not getting carried away by the adulation and glamour, and having a more long-term vision. And again, if it were up to me, I would nudge all of these top 20 people in each domain to start businesses rather than target the world of films. Each to their own. But I believe filmmaking, acting, production, direction, they're their own crafts, and unless you're deeply passionate about it, don't go for that. Stay in this game. There's much more money to be made. I believe we're only through with about 20 to 30% of the total market saturation in terms of.
But the burnout at 24, that's like really young.
It's what we've observed. I don't know why that happens. We've also observed that a lot of the tier 2, tier 3 talent don't burn out. It's a lot of the tier 1 talent that burns out, which is urban upbringing versus urban upbringing, but from a tier 2, tier 3 city. So I don't know. I guess they make so much money early on that.
And then no other career can give them that kind of instant celebrityhood, that kind of money.
Yeah.
Which other career can you get? If you get into retail, if you get into whatever, you can't make that kind of money by the time you're 23, 24.
Yeah, again, double-edged sword. So we have people like Nancy Tyagi who've changed the lives of their families. And then we have a lot of people who've earned a lot of money, burnt it all on like shoes and cars. And like then eventually when the career fades away, they're not able to bounce back.
How did you not do that?
Again, luck factor. I believe that a big reason for this is the people around me. So I met the right people at the right time. I genuinely believe that destiny wanted me to play a team game rather than a solo sport. And you have the option of doing both in this career. You can either grow individually, constantly work with freelance professionals, not build a team, and that's also okay. I chose to build a team because my vision for what I'm doing with my career is always very business first. I want to, there's this proverb from an African tribe, I forgot the name, but it says something like, when you want to go fast, go alone. When you want to go far, go together. So always had a team first mentality, and the people who I met along the way would always tell me, hey, this is what you're doing wrong. Your content is starting to get boring. I think you're becoming arrogant. I think you're becoming overconfident. And I think there's a need for that at every stage. So even now, Atharv, who's like behind me, he's like a lot younger than me, but my early conversation with him was, if you ever feel that I'm doing something fundamentally wrong as a professional, it could be arrogance, it could be overconfidence, it could be overlooking certain things, please tell me. If you feel any of the online criticism is valid and you feel I'm not incorporating it, please tell me, because I'm not done with where I want to take my own journey. But again, that's me and my childhood trauma speaking.
What childhood trauma are you talking about?
Great parenting, but both my parents are type A type personalities. So it was always an environment where I was supposed to give my best to everything that I took up. That wasn't really the childhood trauma. That was the basis of it. I think, you go through these moments in your life which create your sense of how to be throughout the rest of your life. So for me, I took up martial arts pretty early and I was really good at it, but couldn't go beyond state level competition. So there was always that void in me. I want to do something to be recognized on a national level. I was always an attention-seeking kid. Didn't get as much attention as I would have liked in school. That's the other aspect of trauma. The breakups you go through as a teenager, where you kind of want to show your exes how far your life has gone. These are like pieces of trauma that you use at different stages in your career. The childhood trauma that I'm using at this point is I mean, it sounds very cliched, but I genuinely just want to make it a better world in terms of information, in terms of access to career guidance. I didn't have that when I was 20, 21, 22. Like the trauma I think that still stayed with me now is like engineering college trauma. Yeah. And a lot of the engineers turned YouTubers will empathize with what I'm saying. I did a podcast with Think School where probably for like an hour of the podcast we just spoke about this, that throughout the 4 years of college we were constantly told that you won't amount to anything. There's a lot of mental health battles that you go through in college. So I think remnants of that are still present in my heart and I'm still trying to battle through that.
Fear of failure?
Yeah. Like in my head, I don't... I sat with my sister and I confided in her recently. I told her that, no matter what I do, I always feel like a failure. Like I always feel like I've not achieved what I could. I always feel like I've, underachieved. Like that's always a very strong feeling, and that partly comes from having type A personality family members, and I think that's actually a blessing in disguise. But it heavily is an outcome of the process of becoming an engineer in our country. So in your 11th and 12th, you're always told to target the top colleges like the IITs. You may study for it and realize that it's not your cup of tea. Then you get into a mid-tier college. You go then you realize that, okay, this is not what I thought engineering was. classmates will bully you, troll you. Some professors, not all of them, but some professors will brutally bully you, troll you. All that stays with you. I think these are your formative years. So there is a sense of anger, a sense of a lack of achievement that does become a driving force. And then the thing is, when you realize that that driving force actually works for you, you're not ready to completely let it go. So I have a theory, and I might be completely wrong, but my hypothesis is that after I become a father, I think I'll completely be okay. But until then, I'll always have a sense of not having achieved enough. So, yeah.
It's hard, no, for people who are watching the show. They'll think, what? He's not achieved enough? Like, does he feel that way? It's the same as when I think Deepika Padukone spoke about, like her sense of inadequacy at times. And, I was like, my God, how can she be feeling that sense at some point of time?
I've noticed a sense of inadequacy in all the top people that I've spoken to some degree. Ma'am, I say this with a lot of respect, but I've noticed it in you as well, and that's a big force behind your growth as well.
The feeling that maybe your self-worth is really...
I think that little lack of self-worth is always the right fodder for a sense of motivation when it comes to the career, because if you're completely satisfied with where you go, you won't improve. Again, there's a positive spin on this. You read this on a lot of sports people's bios on Instagram. They call it Mamba mentality. So one of the greatest basketball players of all time, Kobe Bryant, used to talk about this, that you just keep getting better every single day.
I think it's maybe a lack of self-worth. It's like if somebody calls me up and said, we want to give you an award, I said, मैंने कुछ किया नहीं है. So I actually haven't got an award. I've never taken an award. So if somebody used to call me, it is a lack of self-worth, I guess, where I feel मैंने कुछ किया नहीं है. I'm only asking the questions. So why would you give me an award? For what? For asking questions? For reporting? The others are doing things which I am talking about, or I am reporting or writing, or so I don't want an award.
I mean, ma'am, at least for me, what I look up to in human beings who've achieved things, and you're in that category as well, I personally respect the sense of execution a lot. And you've executed for 2.5, 3 decades now? 3 decades.
Yeah, more. Yeah, okay. 1989, I think I started.
And I remember shooting that episode with you, and my sense after the episode was, wow, Smita ma'am needs to be asked more questions.
Okay.
But the kind of data and the kind of inputs you had in that episode, that was the feeling I was left with at the end. So often, and some people say this about me also, that why you not ask questions? Because it is my job to be asking the questions. But I think that at the end of the day...
Does it make you uncomfortable, Ranveer, being on the other side?
No, I love it. I probably love it as much, if not more, than being on the questioning side.
Okay. You like talking about yourself?
I like talking about what I've learned. I definitely love talking about myself early on in life, and then I met people much greater than myself. And as you grow in terms of career, you end up hanging out with better and better groups, and then you realize how far you're left to go. I mean, how long the path is in front of you.
I don't like, I've only done 3 so far. With people I know I'm comfortable with. I saw a whole bunch of your podcasts and I felt I was comfortable speaking with you, and I did with 2 other people who I felt, theek hai, I can talk, because I don't want to be sounding boasting or, throwing names around. It might happen to you, I don't know. You have celebrities all around you. Does it rub off on you at times, their celebrityhood?
Yes.
It does?
Does a little bit.
Huh.
You just start aiming higher in life. At least for me, that's what I've absorbed. Dr. Nene, Dr. Shriram Nene.
Yeah.
If you followed his journey, like people on the surface know him as
Madhuri's husband. Yeah.
That guy has one of the most incredible careers I've ever come across.
He's a doctor, medical doctor.
He began as a heart surgeon.
Yeah.
Flourished, I think did more than 10,000 heart surgeries.
In the US.
Yeah. After that, built a medtech startup, sold it. Is living his second innings of life in India as one of the top angel investors in our country. Again, he's also in that Maslow's needs hierarchy. He's reached that point of self-actualization, which is also why he's doing content at this point. The kind of questions he asks, the kind of conversations you have with people like that definitely rub off on you. It answers so many of the questions you have as a 30-year-old who's providing for his family. You have so many doubts, so many questions. You have this vision for your life and you don't know who to turn to. Then you turn to Dr. Nene, you turn to John Abraham, you turn to Nikhil Kamath. So it unlocks doors for you. That's the positive side of it. I would definitely say that the negative side is little things like I think in Delhi one is judged by the car that they're in. In Bombay one is judged by the place that they live in. So while I have a beautiful house, some of my celebrity friends will be like, "Oh, why are you staying in Andheri?" Now, how do I explain it to them that I've built out my whole setup here? My team lives here as well. So there's these little moments like that, but again, this is a very subjective journey. And the people you actually want to hang out with will ask you that question, but will still choose to hang out with you. Okay. So that's the kind of celebrities I really enjoy hanging out with. Otherwise, there's a whole layer of celebrities which is very surface level, which doesn't have the depth, behind what they've achieved. Sometimes they've just gotten lucky, I feel. They've definitely worked hard, they've definitely executed, but they've got far more success than their mindset would probably allow them in another profession. That's what I feel. Might be a slightly judgmental opinion, but they're not the people you want to hang out with anyway. Yeah. So the ones that you want to hang out with will always force you to grow. And I sense that with a lot of the cricketers I meet, because again, the salt of the earth. They're definitely very glamorous, wear the most expensive watches, travel in the most expensive cars, but there's that sense of mutual respect for being self-made. Okay. So and again, growth mentality, athlete mentality, that rubs off on you. John Abraham cut from the same cloth. So any of these people who are self-made, I have friends, Mrunal Thakur, Radhika Madan, all these people have come up themselves. There's a different frequency of conversation that you hit with them.
Yeah. Do you switch off in the middle of a conversation sometimes? Do you go dead and like think, I need to wrap up, I'm done?
For me, I don't know, not in the middle of a conversation, because that's game time for me. Like I know that the footage that's being recorded on the camera is going to be a long-term legacy. It's going to pay the bills. It's going to pay the salaries. So I'm very, very switched on. What happens to me is I get very exhausted by the end of a podcast.
Yeah, it's draining.
Yes, that happens. But I don't know, my hormones don't let me switch off. I think that adrenaline is just firing so much that I'm very switched on. At the most, I will, if it's a terrible podcast, I might stop it at some point and say, "Hey bro, please, just give me better answers. You're not answering this well." I can work for 10 to 20% of the people. The remaining, it's a rejected podcast.
Okay. So now, in conclusion, what new music video, I believe now? So
I'm honestly at a point in my life where
my team tells me Sang Rahiyo with Justine Royal, and you're doing that. I haven't seen.
No, it was an experimental part of my career. Justine reached out, asked me if I'd like to act. I acted in a music video, did well for both of us. But acting, I don't think it's on the cards for me, because I think again you need to have a lot of passion for that craft. I have my passion lies in content and business, so I know that this is the pathway I'm going to take going forward in my own career. I am at a point in life where I'm a little confused about the exact next steps. I have Monk Entertainment and another meditation app called Level Supermind, and those business arcs are not complete yet. So they will be complete perhaps over the next 2 to 4 years. And that's when I'll be thinking about what next. But that'll also be at the same point that I envisage myself getting married. And I do believe that plays a role in how you go about your trajectory of life.
So you've got that also slotted at this age I'm going to get married, this age I'm going to become a dad.
I think so, and I'll tell you why. Like,
how does that work?
For me, whenever I have chalked out something, my experience of life since age 22 has been that it happens roughly at that point, give or take a year. So I'm just relying on my own sense of, hey, this is what worked for me. I think this is what will work.
Some astrologers told you. Do you go to?
I have understood astrology through the show, and I respect it as a craft, but it's not what I use as a gauge for my own trajectory. Okay. I use again the mentors I meet through the show. I ask them that what's the right age for this step, or how should I be planning my life next. So I use their experience as my astrology, not the actual astrologers.
Amazing. All the best to you. It's been a great conversation.
Likewise,
Love talking with you.
As always.
So thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you for watching or listening to this edition of the ANI podcast with Smita Prakash. Do like or subscribe on whichever channel you have seen this or heard this. Now, Ranveer Allahbadia, popularly known as BeerBiceps, India's favorite YouTuber. Ranveer's podcasts are avidly watched by youth across all audio and video platforms. Ranveer covers a variety of topics such as fashion, finance, fitness, motivation, and self-development. He has a very engaging style and simplifies complex issues. In fact, he gets trolled often for oversimplifying stuff. And then there are people who get grossed out over some of the topics that he discusses, like occult and aliens. Thank you, Ranveer, for being part of the podcast. I'm looking forward to this conversation. As viewers and listeners would know that I've appeared on your podcast, so I'm really looking forward to this conversation where I grill you.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm also looking forward to another episode with you because you were one of the nicest people to podcast with.
Oh, you're sweet. So, I have a number of questions to ask you, but before all that, the last time that I met you was at that the wedding of the year, wedding of the decade, wedding of the century. I don't know what to term it as, the Ambani wedding. I saw you there, and you even did a show on that. What was your impression about the wedding? Tell me.
Very memorable from a personal standpoint.
And from a Punjabi standpoint, no?
Yeah. You always look forward to events like that.
Huh.
Also, in terms of how intense YouTube and our schedules with shoots get, we pretty much shoot every day. So my social life is very, very minimal other than these kind of interactions. So this is that once in the year moment where I got that kind of relief. And this is literally the best possible scenario for a social event in terms of the people you're meeting, in terms of just the whole experience of it. Very, very memorable. The scale was something that I'll never be able to get out of my head. I'm sure you feel the same.
It felt like, I was there at the reception only. I wasn't there at the other events there weren't too many Bollywood celebs the day I attended the reception. And it was like the G20 event, if you know what I mean, like that showcasing of Kashi and things. It was more like an India event.
Yeah. Also, just want to take this opportunity to say that we're not paid to do this.
Yes, zero.
I think I made that podcast very naturally because the way life works as a content creator is that you have a certain life you're living in terms of your human experience. You have moments where you have emotional spikes. And usually for me, it's been 9 years of content. If I have an emotional spike, my immediate response to that emotional spike is turn this into content. So I was feeling so overwhelmed. I thought, wow, I have to create this piece for the internet. Now I don't know what kind of PR exercises went on, but I definitely wasn't part of those.
Yeah, true.
So,
but yes, 9 years of creating content, as you say. I mean, it's like being a journalist. You were like a journalist there. Because when you're looking at something, you're not just looking कि मैं शादी attend कर रहा हूँ या मैं event attend कर रहा हूँ. You are looking more कि my God, this is masala for content. You know what I mean? It's like a journalist. For everything that we go, it's like a story. How are you different from a journalist mentally? What do you think?
I think I'm slightly more immature. Let's start there. No, I'm kidding. I think, honestly, the way content creation works is that there's an aspect of it which is not sustainable. I don't think it is the kind of career where you should tie yourself down to that occupation for your whole life. It can get pretty gruesome. It can burn you out a bit. I've made peace with it in terms of I've kept like a deadline for myself, which is roughly another 9-10 years. I feel I'm at half time right now. I'm only going to do this for like another 9-10 years, and I really enjoy it. That's the other aspect of it. So there's really high highs and really low lows. Also, I think in terms of content creation, the way it's different from journalism is that the kind of content a journalist has to go about is very current affairs related, is very geopolitically related, etc., etc. Like it's about the news. For us, I personally feel every content creator has their own domains that they tackle. My domain is emotions rather than like just current affairs. So even if we're doing a political podcast, if we're doing like a podcast related to geopolitics, I'll always try to tie it with human psychology and human emotion. So this sauce can spread itself to any domain. I think that's the fundamental difference for me. But in saying that, someone like Nitish Rajput, Dhruv Rathi, Think School, all these guys, they're more inclined to the current affairs side of things. So every content creator has their own style of going about it. I do believe it's a much more casual job than journalism. There is a responsibility attached, but it's far lesser than what the responsibility related to journalism is about. Like,
quite fascinating when you say that I give myself itna time to do this. Like when I was your age and I was getting into journalism, video journalism, because it was just a start of video journalism at that stage. It was called video because wo VCR pe hota tha, but it was the start of that. And my generation, I think, kind of drifted into it. Wasn't working in this watertight compartments of ki. When I reach 30, I will do this. When I reach 40, this is where my career is going. So I find it fascinating that you're already decided कि मैं इतने देर तक इतना करूँगा. That one point I want to ask you about. And the second, you said the highs are high and the lows are low. What was the low point or the lowest point that you felt, that what am I doing? Why am I doing this?
Definitely the start. I think that was one very big low point, because 9 years ago there was no concept of content creation in the world. So to go about the journey alone, that was a low. The other forms of lows are not the public trolling, online hate one gets. That's what one would assume from the outside looking in. It does affect content creators, but again, every content creator is very different from every content creator is different. So for me personally, the lows are always synonymous with the lows that we face in terms of engagement, primarily because I'm also paying a lot of salaries. And we end up getting some kind of a slight kind of financial pressure if the views and engagement goes low. The way I've always looked at content creation is as a business first. So for me, my low moments are always that one moment or maybe 2 moments in a year where we see a little bit of a drop in engagement. Often it's not in our hands. Sometimes just, for example, January, every year, the engagement drops. Sometimes July, every year, the engagement drops. This is something we've seen over the last 9 years. And I know this by this point, but every time we see a slightly less amount of engagement, it does affect you on a psychological level, even now. And that's something I'm grappling with even 9 years in, which is why I think the solution I've built out for myself is what I spoke about prior to this. In terms of whenever you feel an emotional spike, just turn it into content, focus on the process, do it for yourself first and foremost, because there's a very big luck factor in this job as well. For example, just with podcasting, you keep getting better with every podcast. You're working hard, you're giving 100%, but at the end of the day, you're only going to get a Dr. Jaishankar once on your show. You're only going to get a John Abraham once on your show. You're only going to get a Kohli once on your show. So that's not in my hands. We've built out an infrastructure, we've built out a machinery, but there's a very, very big luck factor at play. So you are governed a lot by factors that are not in your control. That is the lack of ease for me in this occupation. I feel it's quite unstable, it's quite volatile. All one can do is build infrastructure and be ready for the good moments.
You have conversations which may not get you the numbers, but they're amazing conversations when you're doing it. Like, at least that's my experience, that sometimes I would do a conversation I'm fascinated with, I'm really happy with the conversation, but it may not get me the engagement, it may not get me the numbers. So that's a low, because your team will say ki isme to number nahi aaye, but you've done a good conversation. So how do you balance it? Do you feel good, bad? How do you feel about it?
Honestly, ma'am, I know that what you're saying makes sense, and that's the much nicer, more mature way of looking at things. It's just that I've not reached that stage of maturity to some degree where I do tend to get affected by, a lack of performance, a lack of results. Because primarily for me, over the last 9 years, the turning point was where we became extremely result-oriented. So by year 6-ish, I sat down with my core team and we decided that for us, it's going to be all about engagement and growth after this point. And that was the big turning point for me as a content creator. I just think that that's a working hazard for me. That's how my occupation works. You have to kind of target constant growth for your YouTube channel, constant growth for your podcast. And again, that can be a bit of a double-edged sword, because it's great, it will happen if you align yourself towards it. But in the phases where it doesn't happen, in the phases where things don't work out because of luck or destiny, etc., it will affect you.
You really believe in luck, destiny and all playing a very important role?
I definitely do, because of the people I've met on the show, primarily. I think we've done about 800 episodes. So it's been a very intense learning journey. And I'm not very focused on career advice or on, subject matter, much more focused on human emotions and human stories through my work. So this has been one of my learnings, that at least for 90% of my guests, destiny and luck has played a role in their journeys. And if you take a step back from your own journey, this is what's worked for me. I've always noticed that the turning points always had a bit of a luck factor, a bit of a destiny factor.
Yeah, true. Sometimes you feel itni mehnat ki par wo nahi chala. And some of your guests say that too in their interviews, that we worked so hard on this film and it didn't work, and some were at a breeze, but it clicked. So yeah, luck plays. And I mean, even for you to start, this wasn't what you imagined. I guess you'd be doing podcasting. Your education was taking you on a different line. Your parents being doctors, they would have expected a different line in their careers, in their career plan for you.
Can you imagine me being a doctor?
No, I can actually, because you're so experimentative that you would have been fabulous even as a doctor, I feel.
Yeah, I love biology, love the doctors we have on the show, especially when we're talking about neuroscience or something like that. But I had an innate fear of blood while growing up, and that was the primary factor because of which I didn't take up medicine. And that was a little bit of an issue at home, but my parents were also kind of relaxed. I think both my parents are very creative people, and their parents were doctors and engineers themselves. So they didn't get to pursue their creative passion. So when I reached that age 22 mark after engineering college, they weren't okay with me kind of taking an alternative path. Again, I've said this a lot, but my dad had sat me down and told me that take a month after engineering college, I'll provide for you. And after that, you're going to have to provide for yourself. We're not going to pay for your food. We're not going to...
Wow.
Yeah, like all my expenses, the pocket money, it stopped. Fortunately for me, I'd earned a little bit of money from my internships, and I'd started earning money through fitness training. So during engineering college, I became a certified fitness professional. And right after engineering college, I did an odd job, like I worked in an engineering factory, figured out stuff, figured out how business works. And then immediately after that conversation with my father, I figured out how to begin a career as a fitness trainer. And I earned a lot of money back then for a 22-year-old, but invested all of it in YouTube. So that's how the YouTube journey began. And in retrospect, thank you, Dad.
Yeah, I guess it takes a while to figure out when your parents throw you into the swimming pool, ki tairna seekho, or tell you to get into their career. I mean, most parents would want to protect the kids, if they've gone through struggles, to see that it becomes easier for the children. But then there are some parents who feel that that's not the right way. Kids need that getting into the swimming pool without knowing how to swim. Ki tairna waise seekho. There are various ways of parenting. Yeah. I agree with what your parents did. I mean, I would do the same with my kids, or I kind of liked it with what my parents did. Similar kind of training, that it's your hard work. And I didn't take money either from my parents ever since college, like do it on your own kind of a thing, But yeah, when you were talking about your earlier fitness training, when you started with that, even though you're the most favorite podcaster in India, tell me about BeerBiceps. Why BeerBiceps? I mean, people who don't know, my viewers and listeners who may not know why you started with BeerBiceps as the name.
Yeah, the original thought behind that was that I couldn't speak Hindi well back then. Hindi as a language is something that is very easy to speak conversationally, but when you're speaking to camera, when you're making up a script on the go, it's not the easiest process.
Correct.
So for me, my thinking language was English. For many of us in Mumbai, it is that way. You can have a conversation in Hindi, but you can't speak to camera. So I thought, okay, I'm doing English, might as well target an international audience. No one's going to follow someone called Ranveer Allahbadia who's sitting at 200 subscribers on YouTube, but someone might be intrigued by the name BeerBiceps. So that back then, in terms of fitness YouTube channels, everyone was promoting the idea of being obsessed with fitness and making it your whole life.
But why beer?
I wanted to promote the idea of balance within fitness. So have fun, party, but also work on your fitness. And at that point in my life, this is before I became a teetotaler. I became a teetotaler at 25. But pre-age 25, I had a pretty wild engineering college life and
So beer was your go-to?
Back then, yes.
Right? Like, I guess engineering students all have one weakness, what do you say, or one penchant, I don't know what you want to call it, where it's a go-to thing that they would go.
I think engineering college is divided into two poles, the front benchers and the back benchers.
Okay.
So the front benchers will do everything right and study and do all the right things even from career perspective. Backbenchers are always the ones who end up leaving college and getting into films, getting into YouTube, getting into startups.
How did fitness happen?
I grew up pretty overweight. At age 16, I was diagnosed with a gallstone. And that was a very painful experience. It was so painful that I decided that I'm never going to let my body reach this point of a lack of health again. And the rest is history. Just one thing led to another. Ended up being mentored by the right people from a fitness perspective. Got really into it. Realized that, okay, it's affecting my personality and confidence levels well. So it's probably the right habit to inculcate. So just got very deeply into it again during engineering college. I think that phase of engineering college was very difficult, but it led to a lot of tangentially good things for my life. So yeah, a lot of BeerBiceps has happened back in college.
We talked earlier about how people think that when content creators are trolled a lot, it affects them mentally and things. It does. To many people, it does. To you, did it affect you? Because you get trolled a lot. You get criticized sometimes for oversimplifying. Of course, you need to do that with your audience. You need to simplify it because young people are mainly your viewers. So you need to complex subjects like foreign affairs. For example, when you were speaking to Dr. Jaishankar, there are many journalists who said, "Yaar, itna simplify kyun kar raha hai?" So my thing was that his audience doesn't understand complex subjects and he's trying to simplify to his audience. And I think the government of India or the BJP realized at that moment, that's why they reached out to you and invited you over to ask those questions. So when the trolling happens, when the memes come in, how does it impact on you?
Okay, can I answer two questions?
Sure.
I'll talk about the simplification and then I'll talk about the trolling. But let's begin with the trolling. Okay. Trolling, the only time it affected me in my whole content creation journey was the first time it ever happened. In year 1 or year 2, I had made a video that went viral. It was about Amir Khan's Dangal transformation, and I spoke about perhaps that the fitness angle is not as natural as is being projected online. Again, that was back then, and that video went viral. We got a wave of hate, and that was just new for me to see. It was a new life experience.
Hate bole to fans of Amir Khan
yes,
going for you.
Back then. And truth be told, I was sitting at about 50,000 subscribers. I did look at that as an opportunity at the age of 23 that, hey, I know fitness, I'm known as a fitness content creator, might as well talk about this because this is the new age of digital content. In retrospect, it was a good move for my career, but I do regret it a little bit in terms of targeting Amir Khan. Irrespective of the topic that we spoke about, I met him later on in life. I apologized to him because I realized that I was trying to do it's called forced collab or second-hand collab. We're basically using someone else's name, sometimes critically, to get a burst of growth on your own YouTube channel, which we see a lot of nowadays. These kind of forced collabs.
Yeah, sure.
So anyway, that was the first time hate affected me, and fortunately for me, the thing is, again, I go back to engineering college, you go through a lot with your professors and your classmates. It's a very competitive environment. It's a very crab mentality oriented environment. So you go through a lot in those 4 years. Without expanding too much on this aspect, just go watch Three Idiots. That's a softened version of the things that happen in engineering college. So I do genuinely believe that you become pretty stoic at the end of those 4 years, and that's what's helped me throughout my journey. I see a lot of content creators getting very, very affected by online trolling, hate, etc., etc. For some reason, I think I've just blunted it out over the last 9 years. So I literally take it in through 1 year, take it out through the other, and the stuff that remains in my mind is the feedback that I can utilize to improve.
You do see the feedback?
Yeah, of course.
Because I saw that interview that you did with John Abraham, in which he gets trolled a lot, and he get not only on social media. His was the time of film magazines, where they said he's wooden and he's useless, and I mean he's become a billionaire through movies, through investments, whatever. But the point is, he said that I don't care. They can write what they want. If that was to affect me, then I wouldn't be working. And we talked about this in your podcast with me, in which we talked about this trolling business and things like that. But didn't you take that back home? Didn't you discuss it with your parents? And didn't it bother you?
Only back when I was 23, I remember discussing it with my father and my girlfriend at the time. And your core support system has a role to play in those situations, according to me. But again, that was back then. Over the years, I've realized the nature of online trolling. For example, if you want to understand it better, go to any Twitter troll account or anyone who constantly targets your account. You'll go through their page and you'll see probably 30 to 40 tweets a day, many of which are trolling different accounts. So you realize that, okay, should I be taking this person's opinion seriously? That's case A. Case B of understanding trolling better. So I have spoken about things that I shouldn't have spoken about in my past, like 5 years, 6 years ago when I was 26, 27, just starting to use Twitter, giving an opinion on something where it's not really required for a YouTuber to give an opinion. Gotten trolled and cancelled. Back then, cancelling had just become a new thing. This is back in the lockdown. Even a tweet written against BeerBiceps on Twitter, the best case scenario for that tweet is that it gets retweeted heavily, gets liked heavily, goes on many people's feeds. When you open up the data of that tweet, at the most, I have seen probably 19,000 or 20,000 likes on an anti-BeerBiceps tweet. Parallelly, we upload 4 podcasts a week, each of which is 2 hours long. We get 19 to 20,000 views within the first 10 minutes of that podcast. We get 19 to 20,000 likes in the first day of that podcast. And some of those podcasts end up hitting 250k likes, 300k likes. So, when you really put things into perspective, when you see things from a macro lens, you realize 2 things. 1, the amount of love far outweighs the hate. And 2, all of the world's hate is concentrated on X. So I don't take X very seriously, other than taking feedback from certain accounts. So if someone's tweet really stays in my mind, I'll first go to that account and I'll figure that, is this a person who constantly criticizes everyone, or is it a person who actually has a keen eye for improvement? And if it's the latter, then I'll take that into account and I will apply it in my work. Now, as for the simplicity aspect of this process, there's a couple of angles. One, I'm an India first content creator. In our country, you gotta stay 1 step ahead of the audience, not 10 steps ahead of the audience, if results, engagement is your main goal.
What do you mean 1 step ahead of audience?
Most of our country only got like budget-friendly internet access in 2016 or 17. I think that's when the Jio wave hit.
Jio, yeah.
I began creating Hindi content in 2018. And I've evolved with that audience, as is the case with any content creator. You end up growing up along with your audience. So I've seen their evolution. India is a country where, say, take for example, a tier 3, tier 4 town in India, okay? These kids who were teenagers back then got budget-friendly internet back in 2017. Their parents probably didn't even have a television. So we've gone from being a generation that would only use newspapers to understand the world into being a generation that has the same access to information that a kid sitting in New York or San Francisco has. So it's a very peculiar reality for our country. According to me, India is only now ready for niches. This is in 2024. For all these years, you couldn't make niche content and get the same kind of engagement related growth or numbers related
like
growth.
The content that you make on TRS BeerBiceps, if you were to make the same content 10 years ago, parents wouldn't be sitting with their kids or allowing their kids, because it was community watching on television. One TV and everybody sits together and watches.
I think it is still a version of that to a degree. Let me break down that simplicity angle in an easier way. For example, you have these big TV networks who have different channels for different purposes. So XYZ News, XYZ TV, XYZ English. I am not XYZ News, which I feel is a bit of a niche. It's a much more elaborate form of content. I am the kind of YouTube channel that you'll switch on at home, leave in the background, and you might make your mum watch it. So you have to be very aware of that. Which is why even if I'm talking about a topic like neuroscience, like depth psychology, like astrophysics, I'll always try boiling it down to the simplest metaphors that are easy to understand.
For whom are you thinking? What is your demographics when you think of the audience?
The next 500 million Indians who use the Indian internet. Which is why even my topic selection is always keeping masses in mind. I feel they're the people who actually need the content. People like us who are sitting in urban metros, the Maslow's needs hierarchy. It says that first you need roti, kapda, makan, which is like your...
Bijli, sadak, pani after that, yeah.
Then you need money and like career and all that. And the last stage you need is self-actualization. I feel most of us in urban metros, we're the 1% of India. So we're already at that self-actualization part. And it's great to create content for that niche. A friend of mine, Think School, creates content for that niche. But most of India is at that first base layer of roti, kapda, makan.
So you want that most base?
On my Hindi channel,
on
yes.
your Hindi channel.
On my English, I'm targeting people like us. So, but again, even within this domain of urban elite, there's a lot of people who don't understand a lot of topics because a lot of urban professionals have quit watching TV some time ago. So they've turned to YouTube and they do want to learn about geopolitics. They do want to learn about even national politics, but they want to learn it in a very easy way. So for me, I know that with my English channel, my main audience is, it changes every 2 years. We have a new cycle of targeting a different kind of audience. So during this cycle, our target is older women on the English channel. And we consciously, create
Thank
content.
You. Especially when you get the John Abraham kind on your show. Yeah, but yes.
The Hindi is the family audience.
Yeah. But see, 2 years ago when I was starting out podcast, I was like, how do I change? Because I had a rigid style of doing things for so many years and you have to keep changing, right?